Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 212 of Humanity Rising. Every day since last May, we've been providing an open space for people worldwide to come together and share their experiences of what it's like going through this extraordinary pandemic and tracking global events as they occur. Over the last 2 weeks here in the United States, there's been more mass shootings by young men against Asians in Atlanta, Georgia, by a 20-year-old, and just several days ago in Boulder, Colorado, by a 21-year-old. Young men access to weapons that have engaged in mass slaughter. And that has been reverberating around the United States, and I'm sure the world, on top of everything that we're experiencing in terms of the vulnerability that we all feel because of the pandemic and the news that we hear of climate change spinning out of control, government incompetence, and unwillingness to really deal seriously with a range of both national and global issues. So today we're going to turn to the issue of mental health, which is in many ways the key issue that all of us have to attend to because it determines not only our psycho-emotional equilibrium, our mental health, our emotional health, determines our physical health to a very significant and sustained degree. One of the ways that we invite all of our listeners to engage in mental hygiene every day is we start our programs, as many of you know, with just a minute or two of heart coherence, where we just pause, center ourselves in our bodies, take a few deep breaths, close our eyes, and place our attention on our hearts. See if we can all listen just for a minute to our heartbeat in a spirit of thanksgiving and gratitude that we're alive at this most extraordinary, vulnerable moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude for each and every one of you who have joined our session today, I want to invite once again Lars Munter and David Somekh, who've been so graciously convening now our 5th panel on public health in a time of COVID. Last time, you may recall, they dealt with digital health. And today they're going to be convening a very distinguished panel on the issue of mental health, longevity, and the workplace. So Lars, David, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. Regardless of which time zone we're in, now is definitely a time for coming together and understanding that we are indeed connected by more than passion, fun, and games, but also by a dedication to a better future. And today, of course, we'll be talking about how to build ourselves, our mental health across a long life, how to connect that with both a productive, interesting, fun, exciting working future and the skills needed to do that. In this case, of course, I am joined by both a great panel, my co-host David, with his extensive experience within psychiatry also, is of course a great way of introducing this topic. Of course, you all know, I guess, in a way, your own brain, and yet, and sometimes we get lost. We find issues and challenges before us. However, of course, there are ways where the system, the ecosystem, our communities can support us in different ways. And that is what we're going to be talking about today as well. We have a nice salute from the European Commissioner on work and workplaces, Nicolas Schmit. But David, a few words, and then we'll commence the video.
Thanks, Lars. Yes, I just wanted to, of course, totally agree with what you've been saying, but just add the extra frame, if you like. This is the fifth of as Jim said, of 5 webinars, and they do form a kind of stream which is relevant to the topic today, I think. First of all, the whole notion of community engagement in health, and again, how that relates to the mental health issue. The notion of the design of systems and making sense of things. And the third one was about the health ecosystem. And again, we have to think about where we place these real issues about the workplace and mental health in the overall picture of how health operates in the world. Digital is an example of how, again, the topics overlap. As we know, there are now ways in which people can be supported in their mental health by digital tools. But of course, the whole context we're offering you is it's much broader than that. There's no one simple angle on this, but the topic of health in the workplace is particularly relevant at this time, especially with COVID and the kind of implications that had. So over to you, Lars.
Well, actually, it's over to our distinguished, guest almost, a video salute from the EC Commissioner, Nicolas Schmit. Rick, if you will, and I'll give the floor then afterwards to...
Dear friends, thank you for inviting me to exchange with you. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend in person as previously planned. Let me introduce myself first for those viewers who do not usually follow the winding roads of European politics and policies. My name is Nicolas Schmit, and I represent the European Commission. I'm in charge of jobs and social rights, including safety and health in workplaces. The European Commission, according to its competencies in this area, works hand in hand with the member states to deliver on the priorities in this very important field. You will discuss today the future of work and mental health. This topic could not be more timely. Take remote working. Before the pandemic, 5% of Europeans worked remotely. They were more than 40% in 2020. While remote working obviously represents advantages, we have also seen a negative impacts. For example, people unable to put a boundary between their professional and their private life. Indeed, remote work has been generalized in order to protect the population from getting and spreading the disease. We rediscovered the value of prevention. This shift from treatment to prevention should not stop after the pandemic. It has to be part of the future if we want people to have longer and healthier working lives. So, we have to find the right balance in the organization of work. Those workers on the front lines had no or little choice. Thanks to them, our healthcare systems were functioning. The food was available and the streets were clean. They have worked under really difficult conditions, putting their mental health under strain. On the European level, we acted. Early in the pandemic, we provided employers guidance to address all health issues, including mental health at work. We continue to reflect with social partners on how to ensure workers a right to disconnect. We also want platform workers to have better working conditions, including access to social protection. In the context of digitization, digital training is a priority. It can promote healthier working conditions if it is rightly shaped and organized. The EU has made an unprecedented amount of money available to its member states to help with the recovery. Member states should use their recovery plans, notably to invest in infrastructures to make their economies greener and more digital, but also invest in quality job creation with good working conditions. We will build cohesive, healthy, and finally more resilient societies if we aim at an economy of well-being. This applies also to companies that should care about the health and well-being of their collaborators. A next step will be a new strategy on safety and health at work to determine how we can further contribute to the improvement of safety and health at work, including measures to address psychosocial risks. The strategy will be presented in June. It is our common interest to achieve its goals. Therefore, we have to work together to make our workplaces healthier and safer. I wish you all a productive and creative meeting. Thank you.
And I wish I could thank the Commissioner directly, but that's of course not really possible. It must be, at least at best, it would be by sharing my good thoughts with him by a distance. I have to think about it, but at least I have the opportunity to now present his advisor, Velea Society, and joining me also now, Katie Rizvi, representing the EU Health Coalition, to talk about some of the issues related to what the Commissioner just talked about, but also our intro and the mental health across the life course. Of course, in his case, the part of our lives that are related to work and the workplace. But so, Velea, obviously that was, well, actually your boss. You had, and as we can all see, you're probably not at work right now. And it has been a challenging situation for most of us working and distance working, as he said. The skill, the point about balance, how to balance mental health when at work, when work is no longer work, or rather not really related to the workplace anymore. Could you share, I mean, how has that sort of been a massive shift over time? Mostly with benefits or mostly with problems?
Thanks, Lars. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending where you are. And I hope you can hear me well. Indeed, as Lars said, I work for Commissioner Schmit, and I'm very pleased and really thankful, Lars and David, for inviting me today. So just to add to this short intro, that as Jim said, I guess at the beginning of this webinar with the meditation is really, you couldn't have a more fitting start for today's topic. You really do what you preach. So very impressive. I don't want to take too much time here. We will be able to develop another questions. If you ask personally, I think remote work has been, let's say, 50-50 for me, because I have been allowed to go to the office from time to time, and actually I was quite happy about that. But it's not the case for everybody, and I hope that we can dig into this topic a little bit more deeper later on, and I will be happy to develop. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Katie, you join us also as a representative of the EU Health Coalition. Well, not necessarily focused on the last year or so, but mental health in the workplace. How do you work with that? What does that mean?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lars, for the question. And also thank you so much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm just playing catch up, listening to Jim and listening to the introduction to really understand the vibe of these meetings. I understand this one is the last episode in a series. So I'm trying to think about how to make my contribution relevant for the listeners and those watching this web stream. And thank you so much for the questions. I'm very lucky myself that I have work. And because I'm representing the patient community, and yes, as you said, I'm one of the members of the EU Health Coalition through Youth Cancer Europe, the organization that I represent, and which is one of the founding members of the EU Health Coalition. It behooves me to really represent those people in our society who sometimes are less lucky because maybe they don't have work, or they were not able to join the labor market after a very long chronic illness or a serious or life-threatening illness such as cancer. And it's really interesting how we are tying together all these different topics, because actually, as you can imagine, mental health is a very important, massively important topic for our patient community. And I think with the pandemic and with all its challenges, some of the feelings of loneliness were even more emphasized, and a lot of people have been affected by it. And for people with very serious diseases, or people with disabilities, or people who were anyways already socially marginalized or more vulnerable, this last year has been really, really difficult. And I think what we need to look at is the opportunities that are changing society because of COVID, and because of the bigger emphasis on remote working, and a very quick demand on employers to change their strategies and to allow more flexibility, how it could actually bleed over to help those more vulnerable people, and what the pandemic has shown us, that that the labor market can be resilient by adapting, by being more flexible, by allowing working from home, by individualizing and personalizing positions. I think we need to see how it might help our more vulnerable citizens, and how going forward we could actually learn from all of this and have better offerings and make the labor market a better place, a happier place, a more adaptable place, a more flexible place, and therefore provide more inclusivity for people around the world. And this is not just for Europe. This obviously is something very important globally as well. But I'm very excited about having Vilija here as well, because I mean, maybe later on we can talk about this more in depth, but with the publication of EU's Beating Cancer Plan, there is a lot of connection between DG Sante and your commissioner, and seeing how we can actually help chronically ill people and cancer patients get back into the labor market. And there will be different studies coming out about this, and we're really looking to the social pillar to actually solve some of these issues that are very important for us.
Indeed. I think maybe one of the things that this situation have shown, and I think maybe you've answered the question already, but I'll allow you to elaborate. We often talking in terms of things that are nice to have and things that are need to have. And previously, maybe we talked about mental health as something that we could do more about. Is this now shown to be a need to have situation, Vilija?
Yeah, well, I suppose that, well, this is a really good question. It's a key question. I think for me, there is a very clear consensus now that there is a business case for occupational safety and health. And the pandemic really only reinforced this, because we could see that without necessary measures to protect workers' health and safety, both physical and mental, economical activity cannot really take place, or is very much compromised, or somebody needs to pay for that. So in terms also of their health, and that we could see with the frontline workers, as my commissioner already mentioned. So in terms of economic cost to Europe of for example, work-related depression, it was already estimated a few years ago, it doesn't date yesterday, but that it costs around 600 billion euro annually. And these costs are the costs that occur for employers, resulting from the fact that people are absent of their working places. They also cover the loss of productivity, healthcare costs, social welfare costs. So this is not negligible in terms of economic burden. And I am not even talking about social, personal, societal burden that it has. So according to the most recent survey by the European Agency for Health and Safety at Work, EU OSHA, which is equivalent for OSHA, the American agency, around half of European workers consider stress to be very common in their workplace. And it contributes to around half of all lost working days. So for me, all in all, there is no doubt that safety at work is not an extra, it's not a nice to have, it's a core of any activity and has to be treated as such.
Thank you very much. Sort of putting a nail through that question, I guess, a definitive one. as a remark, of course, from our chat, I can also argue that while we're talking about a full life and not just life seen through as a productive member of a workplace, it is still a part of many people's lives, and a part of life of their waking hours that is core to so many people, and therefore also their productivity, but also their social sphere. And that's one of the reasons why, of course, the workplace is so important to also discuss, to at least not overlook. But then, of course, as I guess Vilija would say, skills needed to do that, to survive in that workplace is hard. Katie, your response, I mean, how can we over time build those skills? Is this for the workplace only? Where do we build those skills to survive such a long period in our career, or in our part of our life that starts roughly when we're 25, 30 years old, I guess, for most of us, and nowadays lasts until we are 75, 85. Is this something we should allow or should expect the workplaces to develop for us? It's certainly not something we can build at home, I guess.
The resilience and is that your question? Just to understand the resilience and the right kind of attitude to work, I would argue that actually some of this comes from home, actually, and what I'm seeing, and again, I'm looking at it from the point of view of health and our patient communities. Working is actually a really important part of a person's dignity and feeling fulfilled in their lives. And as you said, just being productive, contributing, being creative, it all really adds to us feeling as a whole person, and even more so for someone who was deprived of the opportunity to work. And a lot of people also feel their self-worth reflected in their earnings, and I think this is very important. We cannot neglect that today's society does put a price tag on our value by the kind of salaries we are earning and things like that. And I think a very healthy attitude about all of this, and how we deal with this, and how we deal with the stresses, and how we work with the work-life balance and the right kind of priorities in life, is something that starts at home. And it's something that is part of personal philosophies and family philosophies, and something that we bring with us from the time we were tiny babes. But there is a huge responsibility on the employer as well to send the right kind of messages. And I think the value in these kind of conversations that we're having is that when you have enough citizens who might be dads, moms, children, healthy people, ill people, professionals, employers, employees, doesn't matter, policymakers, we're all sitting around the table, and we're all talking about our experiences as human beings. And the most important thing is that we can all talk about it, and the more we talk about it, the more some of these things will actually change, and will have a better effect on the human experience. Because we have, all of these different interests have to meet, and there's many different interests have to compromise and come to certain compromises. But I think these are good places to start a discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yet it would be a surprise, I guess, if our educational system, or for that matter, our upbringing, could give us a lifetime of skills to solve anything. Is it time also perhaps to rethink our attitude to education? Are we to have perhaps to be educated for multiple careers? to switch back and forth between the workplace and being pupils, I guess. Vilja?
Yeah, well, this is the big question, I suppose, and I couldn't agree more with Katie that we really need to have a really broad approach to that. And yeah, skills obviously are very important with digital, technological, demographical change, also with the sort of more flexible forms of employment. There is definitely a stronger focus on digital and interpersonal skills. I saw very recently that World Economic Forum identified that among the top 10 skills for the future of work are resilience and stress tolerance. And certainly it is important to help workers with developing the resilience. But as Katie said, and I couldn't agree more, the efforts must be on both sides. So in the EU, the legislation actually requires from the employer to protect the workers by avoiding, evaluating, and combating risks to their safety and health. And this definitely includes the psychosocial risks. Our agency has tools and guidance for companies, including small businesses, on how to tackle psychosocial risks at work, and training and skilling is definitely part of it. Last year, the Commission has launched a Pact for Skills, which is a sort of a broader shared engagement model for skills development in Europe. So I think there is a really important recognition that this upskilling and reskilling will be key, and also in terms of mental health. But just another detail, and also what Katie mentioned, I think that what's also really important, and what this webinar is doing, is tackling stigma that is generally related to mental health, and also in workplaces. It's really the task for all of us to make it easier for people to talk about it, and so we can tackle it better.
Yes. I think you have a comment there, Katie?
Yes, I just wanted to speak to this because I really appreciate the attitude, and I really appreciate the effort that we see from the European Commission in this regard. And and again, I'm going to specifically refer to cancer now, but I think it's much broader and can be applied in a broader way as well. But I know that when the EU's Beating Cancer Plan came out, one of the things that we were really, really looking for is how is it going to be answering some of the burning questions for the chronically ill and for cancer patients. And there were very specific provisions on this, actually. And we were very happy to see initiatives that are going to be forthcoming on reskilling and upskilling, so that they can enter the labor force. And this is very important for everyone, also because the labor market is changing. So I think for anyone, ill or not ill, just being able to be given the chance to learn new skills is really important. The fact that there will be a study coming out next year in 2022 very specifically about return to work of cancer survivors in the entire continent. And it will be, what I'm understanding, mapping the national employment and social protection policies, which will be the first real such mapping exercise done in recent years, which will be very important for us. And that in the upcoming Occupational Safety and Health Strategic Framework, the Commission will be looking into psychosocial skills as well of disadvantaged groups. So that is very specifically going to be looking at stress tolerance, stress training, and resilience training for vulnerable groups. And I think this is a good place where we're starting. And we just will need to have more dialogue to make sure that when these initiatives will actually be implemented and put into practice, it's going to be really serving the most vulnerable. So we love these kind of exchanges. We want to make sure that a lot of groups will be represented, so that the framework is going to be delivered in such a way that is going to be serving our population. And just maybe one more thing, if I may, very, very quickly, because I know, Lars, you introduced me as also speaking on behalf of the EU Health Coalition. And the EU Health Coalition recently released a 10-point recommendation for a post-pandemic Europe, where we're going to be looking at health generally, and mental health is obviously very important for it, because as we have just established how mental health is an integral part of health, period. And one of the recommendations, actually, which I think is very fitting for this meeting, is our call for greater collaboration and coordination between the Commission and European institutions and the regions and the cities, because that's where our citizens live. And I think what we've seen is that's where health is being delivered. That's where care is being delivered. And sometimes it feels like there's a little bit of disconnect. I mean, this is not a criticism. It is what it is. You know, this is how we all evolve. But it's just very important to pay more attention to regions and cities, not just member states as they are when implementing some of the new initiatives by European institutions and by the European Commission.
Thank you very much, Katie. And indeed, I'll thank you both for this part of the session, and I hope you'll stay with us, because there'll probably be questions for you later. But speaking about, of course, some of those care deliverers, we have a video message also from one of our co-presenters today, Lene Soevold, will be sharing a bit of our thoughts about one of those groups that's definitely been struggling with their mental health during this crisis, the healthcare professionals. Of course, there's really had a strong hit while they're trying to help us all survive, basically. But if I may, Rick, you have a small comment, David, before we allow Lene to share a few words?
Yes, it's delightful to have Lene contributing. It's a shame we can't have her in person. I just interject at this point. The Commissioner's very impressive introduction included specifically references to the economy of well-being, which of course we dealt with a couple of seminars back, and also prevention. And I think that this was kind of just touched on in terms of the talk about resilience outside of work as well as in work. And it seems to me this is something that has to be built into all of this, isn't it? Employers have a responsibility. I think they are taking it seriously. We'll hear about that from our two Nordic presenters in a moment. But there's also this whole question of education for life and life skills as part of that prevention and the hope for better mental health of the population as a whole. And that's not really being tackled. It's something perhaps we might come back to later.
Definitely. So without further ado, I guess, Rick, will you please the video from Lene, and then we'll continue.
So thank you very much for inviting me to share some thoughts on this session, Lars and David. I will share some slides with you covering on mental health in the workplace based on both my own observations in my clinical work with business leaders and workers, and also from research that I've been looking into. So we know that it's been quite a different and challenging year for many. Health systems have been overwhelmed and stretched past their limits. And before the pandemic, it was estimated that over 1 billion people across the globe had a mental health condition. and also the healthcare workforce was already challenged before the pandemic with high levels of stress and burnout. For example, study coming out of Stanford showed that physicians typically had around 40% burnout rate before the pandemic. And then COVID came, and we know that we have been facing a lot of uncertainty and changes in the way we live and work during the last year. And the mental health challenges have only increased as expected during the pandemic. I've also done a recent paper on this together with some researchers in Harvard Medical School, in Pretoria University and others, where we have looked on mental health challenges among healthcare workers and really seen the tendency of rise in anxiety, depression, burnout, and even PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. And we have seen these rises even in the general public, and we've seen them especially in vulnerable groups with existing mental health issues, among youth, among elderly, and among healthcare workers. And it's been especially challenging in low and middle income countries. So why should we care about mental health in the workplace? We know that workplace-related stress, burnout, and job dissatisfaction are among the primary reasons for mental health issues and sick leave across sectors. Some of the risk factors are high demands with limited opportunities for breaks, unclear responsibilities or communications, and lack of social support. And a reactive approach to mental health is not enough. This means that only reacting to and intervening with symptoms after they have arisen is not enough. The workplaces across all sectors, including in the educational system and healthcare system, should be important arenas where mental health is prioritized and promoted. So we also know that facilitating these interventions, promoting mental health, promotes well-being, creativity, satisfaction, collaboration, and productivity, among other things. And we need to approach mental health issues, coping, self-care, and resilience in a more person-centered, holistic, and systematic way, while offering stress management solutions and teaching self-care strategies can be valuable for individual workers. It is not enough. The responsibility should not only be on the individual workers. So what are some strategies and solutions that workplaces and business leaders can use to promote mental health? They can promote principled leadership, meaning leading by example and fostering a culture of openness, inclusion, empathy, trust, and support. They can promote openness in general about mental health issues. They can facilitate team building activities, peer support, and self-care activities. They can promote and reward collaboration instead of only focusing on individuality and competition, which has been the norm earlier. And ensure that the workload is in line with the capabilities and resources of individual workers. It's also important to define workers' roles and responsibilities in a clear way. And co-creating involvement is really key, give workers the opportunities to contribute to decisions and intervention that are affecting their work and health. It's also important to promote health literacy and health education in the workplace. We're really seeing the value of this. And offering evidence-based, digital or in-person programs or workshops for promoting not only mental health, but personal and professional development. This really helps to build resilience on an individual and organizational level. And this is one of the areas that I've also worked with, offering different in-person sessions or evidence-based solutions, supporting workers and business leaders through these solutions. And I've really seen that this is really valuable and really has a profound effect. So in conclusion, investing in the health and well-being of the individual workers is investing in the health and well-being of the organization as a whole. It's a lot more that could be said about this issue, and I'm sure others will cover on other aspects related to the skills needed in the future and so on, where flexibility, adaptability, and so on might be very valuable. But you can also have a look at some articles I've written on this topic. I think the best way to find them is just by Googling my name, and you will have some articles from World Economic Forum, Horace's Global Vision Community, and so on. So I'm really happy to share these thoughts with you. And thank you so much for having me. Take care and stay wealthy.
And again, it's of course hard to thank a video message, but yet indirectly you could say thank you to Lene for sharing her thoughts on that. And we will be able to share some of her results as well later on. But now it's actually time for me to give the floor to I think a fellow Dane, and David also, on looking at how one can actually work with mental health in the workplace in a Danish setting. Christian and David, I think it's time for you to take the floor instead of me.
Yes, let's leave it to Christian to make his presentation, and then I'll lead in for the final session. So over to you, Christian.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Lars. I believe that, yes, there I am. Okay, I apologize for the state of my hair, but the hairdressers in Denmark are still shut down, so we're all eagerly awaiting them to open again for us to be able to have a slight trim. You know, I think the biggest challenge of hearing a lot of inspirational people talk before yourself is that you want to say a lot of different things than what you had actually planned to say. But I'm gonna stick with what I wanted to tell you about and try and tie into what has already been said, which I think is lots of very useful and good information and thoughts. But I shall hide my long hair behind a PowerPoint presentation, which I shall now try and share with you all. Here we go. I am hoping you're seeing the presentation. I think you should.
It's fine, yeah.
That's good. Thank you, David. All right. Well, I think I'll start with just letting you enjoy, first of all, this lovely photography, which is workers posing in religiously inspired motifs. What I'm about to tell you is a short story of a national partnership for mental health in workplaces, in Danish called Sammen om mental sundhed, which roughly translates to Together on Mental Health. I work at the Danish Committee for Health Education, as you can see at the bottom, the blue logo, and we have been, I think I dare to say, the driving force of building this partnership throughout and I've been running it throughout the last, I think, about 6 years. It has existed. But let me show you first of all, like so many other things, the actions taken in this case were based on a series of numbers, and these were some of the numbers that struck a chord with the politicians in Denmark and made them call to action in regard to mental health at workplaces. Not saying that they did nothing before this, but these are some of the numbers that inspired this partnership. And one of them is that according to the OECD, 1 in 5 Danes in the working age have mental health problems, and these problems are problems such as stress, anxiety, and depression. And bear in mind that Danes are generally considered to be the happiest people in the world, yet these numbers are, I find, rather striking. Annually, this cost the Danish society approximately 55 billion Danish kroner. I believe Vilja had a number up earlier that was about 600 billion annually at a European level. So this is from a Danish perspective also a large amount of money, and also this is excluding money for treatment. These are factors apart from that. And also we could see that long-term sickness and early retirement due to mental health issues were surging or had been surging for years. So what was decided, among other things, was to establish a national partnership between different types of partners working in different sectors. This, of course, to have a common ground and also to have different angles at how to approach mental health issues at the workplace. Today we're at a place where we have 49 partners around the same table working together on how to address mental health issues in many different areas. Of course, many of the partner organizations, and therefore also the partnership, is concerned with the current situation with the corona pandemic and how this might affect mental health issues as they relate to our work life, and especially, of course, as also has been addressed a few times earlier, the balance between private life and work life. But what was the offset of this partnership was a desire to bring tangible, useful tools to companies who had ambitions to work with prevention or managing mental health issues. Of course, prevention is always to be preferred, that you would completely avoid these things, but I don't think that any of us believe that a complete prevention of these issues is attainable. So, of course, also there will be cases where you have to address it in a meaningful and useful and constructive way. And the way we went about it is that across these partners we mapped and sorted, as I've written, approximately 400 tools with a variety of different subjects that all relate to mental health, mental well-being, and that, of course, relate to a workplace setting. And we connected these tools into a evidence-based Q&A, also to address the issue of making it a shared mission to build an organizational resilience. I believe, as was mentioned just before by Lene, to not make this an individual problem or issue that the individual has to deal with, but to make it an issue that workplaces should deal with as a collective, with the different roles that are present at a workplace, ranging from leader to employee to colleague to people with certain key functions at the specific workplace. It looks like this. Unfortunately, it will be hard to understand for all that don't speak Danish, but it is basically a toolbox, and you're of course welcome to explore it at mentalsundhed.dk is the webpage. I'm sure the slides will be sent out after the session, so you can click on it yourself and have some exploration into both the toolbox and the many nuances of the Danish language. But what we basically did is that we built it as a 4-entrance type of platform where questions and answers addressed the individual employee, the person who in a given case would be experiencing mental health problems or problems that the individual might suspect had to do with mental health, and another entrance addressing the leader or the boss at the workplace. One addressing what is in Danish is called nøgleperson, which is a key person, such as an work environment representative and such, who at least in a Danish context have a certain specific role in aiding the organization and the leadership in addressing, preventing, and handling mental health issues. And the one that I find very interesting in the building of this, but also in the current state of affairs, is the colleague, the close colleague, the person who has no formal responsibility for the work environment, but is often the person closest to the issues and closest to the people who may who may be experiencing issues, and therefore also in many cases has a special vantage point to be vigilant. And I think the addition of the colleague as a role in this, and the specific focus that was actually put on the colleague, not in a formal way, but in an informal way of being someone with a possibly a key insight to changes in attitude or changes in the way close colleagues behave, which might be early signs of issues that, if addressed at an early stage and in a constructive way, might avoid people from falling into more severe problems. So I mean, the partnership was built and is still running with an annual grant from the Danish government, and adding new tools and new partners every year. And of course, a lot of initiatives have been taken by many partners in regard to the corona pandemic, and we're building the platform in accordance and trying to keep up with all the new materials that this partnership and this platform serve to communicate to as many Danish workplaces as we can possibly reach. That is the gist of what I would like to share with you, and my contacts here as well, if anyone is interested in more information about this partnership, of course.
That's terrific. Look, thanks a lot, Christian. That was, I must say, it's really impressive that as well as identifying the problem, there's a whole load of solutions that you're trying out. We're running a little behind time, but just if you can answer very quickly, one of the things is that I know this has been developed for over time in Denmark. How transferable is that kind of system, do you think, to other member states?
Well, I believe that the building of a partnership and the identification of the partners that would make sense to involve in such a project is very transferable. I had the pleasure of coaching a group of young people at the European Health Parliament who actually worked into a policy suggestion.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah,
yeah, and actually it was voted most actionable suggestion in this case competition. So it seemed that there was a wide recognition that this would be applicable.
It's a good answer from the youth. Thank you very much, Christian. Okay, lovely. We must go on now. So I now want to introduce the next session, which will include Carsten. I think will kick off for us, Carsten Obel from the University of Aarhus. Carsten, do you want to give us your view on this whole issue?
Well, thank you very much, David, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be part of this, although I don't really understand the full context, but this is also maybe the whole thing about resilience, that you actually move into a new context, and how do you actually navigate and go through it, although it's stressful and so on. And I very much agree with many of the speakers. And what I think is interesting is when we discuss mental health with a guy like you, David, or an English-speaking person, I mean, we tend to, at least in Denmark, have different views of what is mental health. Is it something related to psychiatry, or is it something that we all need? And I think what I would like to mention in this respect is something that Lars and I has been working with, and this is the reason why I have this background. You can see it's Copenhagen Institute of Future Studies, and we had this session in Nordic countries trying to rule out, I mean, how could we kind of support the next generations of mental health. And of course, I have some suggestions I could share with you, but I think one of the main reasons why we did so was before the COVID-19 situation in the world, which actually is a natural experiment, so to say, from a scientific point of view. That is that you get a situation where, of course, you put a new situation to people and what's actually happening when it comes to mental health. But before that, we were discussing what is it actually that we need for a generation, or for all of us actually growing up in a period where things are changing so fast. Do we need to develop a mental health vaccination program for the population, or even for the youngsters who grow up? And we actually came up with this concept of cultivation of health as something we should have in school as an educational program going on from the first day of school. And I think what's interesting here is not, of course, that we have the key to this in the Nordic countries. It's because we feel the need for discussing this, and because we see this, more demand for treatment, for medication, for talking about our mental health. And it's interesting here, we don't know if it's phenomenological, cultural, or epidemiological. We don't know why is this going on like this. So I would say all this kind of discussion of stress, anxiety, and depression is interesting. And I know maybe one of your colleagues in the UK, David, Nicolas Rose, has invited me into his center that is societal and mental health. This is the kind of the name of the center. And I think it's really interesting to discuss resilience in a social context more than making us all very tough to survive in a very hard and individualized world. And just in brief, what was interesting for me was meeting the definition by the World Health Organization of mental health. And I don't know if you're aware of this definition, but it's very much in line with the formal speaker said. It's more this part of the hedonic, how I feel. There's a resilience and development aspect that links to the thing that you can unfold your potential and manage everyday life. And then this eudaimonic, which is a Greek way of putting it. Eudaimonic is what you contribute to society, small and big, so to your family, to a close friend, and so on. So how you contribute to the communities that you're part of. This is apparently the most healthy when it comes to a more lifelong health, and how you kind of build this into the young people who grow up is really interesting. Although they actually have it in them, but I think how we stimulate this, so we're not. I mean, the worries we have for what kind of future we're giving to our grandchildren, maybe we should also have a little bit of focus on what grandchildren we are giving to the future. So, so this focus of supporting the next generations, and maybe the older of us, maybe we have this responsibility of kind of injecting some of the values and the kind of the basic thing of being a human being is really important, because this is challenged on the social medias, I think. But that was a former discussion, as I understand, the last session you had. But maybe too much more. Sorry about that.
No, I love what you're saying, really. I mean, I could almost written the script myself, because, I mean, you quote me as being a psychiatrist, but the truth is now, as an elderly gentleman with grandchildren, this is what I care about too, and it's about solutions, isn't it? And education it's where it starts from day one, isn't it? In school, just understanding about society and just the need for good health in the widest possible sense. And as you say, that includes the sense of worth of being involved in being part of communities. These are things, that's the big danger, isn't it, of medicalizing the whole thing. So people talk about anxiety, depression. Of course, these are real and they affect people's lives, but it's taking them, it's avoiding what I call the elephant in the room, isn't it? That we're in a very turbulent society where people need a firm base to survive, and that involves education and knowing they can reach to other people. And where that's missing, then of course you get people going out and shooting people and so on, or abusing people in the street. It's just a symptom of something much wider, isn't it?
Yeah, but also I think it's behind me, you can see this suggestion of how we could extend the ABC that we actually focus on in schools. And I think we probably, in Denmark and in the Nordic countries, we have the luck that we can follow all citizens born from 1990 and on. We can follow them with diagnosis, all kinds of things, and we can now even interact with them. So this P4 health, focus on how you can interact with people on smartphones and so on. Can you use this in a productive way, in always iterating what's actually the most needed cultural cultivation of health a generation needs? And I think it goes so fast. Even in my household, I have 4 girls. The oldest is 23 and the youngest is 13. And I can see an enormous difference in how they actually use the social medias, what kind of things are in their mind. So I think we have to look at the specific needs for supporting social resilience for each generation, and it changes all the time. But I think the lovely thing is that you can actually use generate across generations. There's so much to win, also for the ones of us who actually are getting older. I think we can really contribute to social resilience of children and youth if we kind of engage in the discussion and actually would like to contribute. So I think you can be optimistic at some point, but I think it needs an activism that we don't see today.
Look, at this stage, I want to bring in our final contributor, David Wood. David, I've known for some time. Hopefully then the three of us can have a discussion, but I very much admire David's work as a futurist in the UK. And I've asked him to come along because he has a broad view, and he promised me that he would look at what we've been talking about and give a view from the future, if you could put it that way, about where this is leading, maybe.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation to what's been actually a very profound discussion, I have to say. There's a lot of wisdom that is mulling in my mind now based on what's being said. But I would like to draw on my experience in the futurist space, many decades in the mobile computing and smartphone industry, 13 years of running London Futurists, I will look maybe 3 to 5 years ahead at how things might develop. And if I can, I know time is short, I'll just give 3 conclusions, things that may be different in the next 3 to 5 years. First, I think there's going to be even more stress. The stress that we've had from the COVID experience isn't going to be just a blip and then we'll go back to normal. The pace of change is so large. The many other uncertainties are around. The impact of our misuse or imbalance with the environment, the social traumas are going to make more people more stressed than before. It's not just a small number who are particularly unlucky to have cancer or to be in very stressful occupations. Each of us will be to some extent troubled. The second thing is, however, that there will be some more solutions available too. And we've touched on some of the solutions, which is more focus on skills, certain skills than have been available in the past. Skills such as resilience, skills such as agility, skills such as collaboration. But I want to emphasize as well, there will be some tools and technologies that can help with these new skills. I'm not a techno solutionist. I don't think the technology will take us into a better state by itself, but if we are wise enough and we organize it well, it won't just be apps for mindfulness, which we have already and which are quite useful. There will be headsets such as Emotive's headset, which are a bit like a Fitbit for the brain or a Fitbit for the mind. We'll have more ready readout of what's actually happening in people's minds. And there will be other kind of headsets which are a bit like a pacemaker for the mind, which can apply electrical stimulation or magnetic stimulation or all kinds of other things to help to jog the mind into a better state. And that's a very huge subject, but I think there will be a change in what solutions are available. And part of the solution will be a change in attitude. And this is my third kind of prediction for how things could be different in 3 to 5 years' time. And here I'm echoing some of the wise comments made in the text chat. We will be approaching a post-work society, by which I mean that fewer of us will be inclined to assess ourselves by our employment, by how much money we're making, and more of us will be thriving by means of a changed social contract, by which it will no longer be what's sometimes called the Protestant work ethic, which says that unless you're working and earning a good salary, you're somehow a second or third class citizen. That change will come too in stages. That was forecast as long ago as 1930 by the eminent economist John Maynard Keynes, who in a kind of precursor to this event in 1930, he was giving a talk in Madrid in which he said, we can imagine 100 years' time in the future. Technology will have improved so much that we won't actually need to work anything like so many hours, and we'll be well off. The problem of the economic problem will be solved. And whether we live well or not will not be a matter of technology anymore. It will be a matter of what attitudes we have foremost in our minds, whether we still have foremost in our minds that we need to accumulate money, or whether we are living for other things instead. And I think it's actually a very profound forecast. He called it letters to our grandchildren. He didn't literally mean 3 generations ahead. He was talking about 100 years' time. And I want us to accelerate progress towards that state so that we will cope with the greater stress by greater skills and by greater technology, and by changing our attitude as to what is the purpose of life. Less purpose to live, more purpose to thrive.
David, that's lovely. Thank you indeed. And you certainly shot through that overview, but is really, really helpful. Can I perhaps start with Carsten, maybe in giving a reaction to what David's been saying?
Well, I think it's really interesting to hear different futurists come with a point of view, and I think it's I think the difference, what's interesting, I think, is that we see different things from the UK and from other perspectives. And I have a good friend who have children, and in the UK, and also work with mental health, and we see a little bit different perspectives. And I think what's really interesting in this respect when we're discussing the future or the unknown unknowns is actually having this kind of different perspectives from different cultural settings and bringing in how we look at it. So I think the dialogue and the overall kind of discussion of how do we find new models to move forward is interesting. And we tried this, I mean, the discussion of what actually happens when we have a COVID-19 and things are restricted. One kind of stress is actually coming up. Is the stress we had before that is now coming up because there's another situation? And this awareness, should it force us to innovate new ways of looking at things? So how do you move the things in the right way? And I think one funny thing we tried to say is, going back to Lars's point of the mind or the consciousness, I mean, could we have something more humanistic or more balanced as a focus? We have the economic model, and what we actually try to do to put in two marks, say the eco-economics model. Could we look at the more like an ecological way of looking at ourselves as not mentally forced, but looking at the whole ecosystems that we're interacting with, and this idea is actually going well into the kind of understanding that you're providing, David. But I think we need a very strong dialogue across cultures to find the right way for human beings. And being educated professor in Beijing has been interesting also, because they see it at totally different perspectives. And I think this is really what's fascinating about this also, is this initiative here that we get this kind of discussion. But I very much agree with your point of view. After
whether the stress that we're going to have in the next few years, whether that leads us into a much better world or a much worse world, will depend on us doing exactly what you're suggesting, I think, Carsten, which is being able to draw together the best of our current human insights, the best scientific understanding of the mind and of disease, but also the best cultural insights. And we're going to need to be able to bring them together in a more open-minded way than before. And that's going to be quite emotionally challenging, because many of us, when I say us, I mean everybody, we define ourselves by things we are quite comfortable with. And as these comforts and these previous certainties fall away, we can become pretty defensive, pretty tribalistic. But we're going to have to cope with uncertainty. Maybe that's the most important skill of all, to be better at coping with uncertainty. And that it comes out of having a more emotional resilience, more emotional intelligence. So let's have these discussions. We will all probably be transformed in the process, and we will need imagination to imagine how things might be different from before, but we're going to need our critical faculties too. After we've had our flights of imagination, we're going to need to draw together the best of critical thinking too, to realize, well, actually, this wouldn't be so good in reality, and this is possible, and we can get there collectively, hence the importance of collaboration as never before.
But still, I would say, when you collaboration, what is the goal of the collaboration? I think this is really interesting to say. If you see the challenges we're facing now, we have, I mean, the good news is that most people, more and more people in the world are getting a better life. But also you see this reaction. You get more fragmented worlds actually, and also economically. So I think it's also in an ideological and political way, when you talk of mental health, I mean, would you go for another goal than the economic measure of success? I mean, should we go for something else? And I know this audience probably agree that we might go for a more humanistic, as I understand the thread here. But how do we find a new humanism actually that matches the challenges of the social, the bigger social differences? Very, like Bernie Sanders says, few people have a lot of the whole kind of economic capacity in the world. So how do you get a stable world that in this situation don't lead to shootings and to all riots and as you see in the US, I mean, things that we wouldn't have imagined would happen, and we've seen this across time through civilizations. But I think we really have to think about how we manage the situation. And I think it's interesting that the European Union came up with this idea of a Bauhaus 2021 or whatever it is, because it is like with Industry 2.0, we have something like the a situation now where we really have to reconsider in this very fast emerging world, or not only epidemics or the environment, but also technology. I mean, we have to redefine probably ourselves and the way we interact with each other.
Just very quickly on this, because I think we are almost out of time. So what can we put instead of the GDP, which has driven society pretty well, mainly? What do we put? So I want to mention another economist here, Mark Carney. He was until recently the governor of the Bank of England, previously the governor of the Bank of Canada. He has produced a very provocative book in the last few days, Values, in which he argues that to survive, we need to rediscover a multiplicity of values, including solidarity, including humility, and that we have it together to ensure that these values become foremost in the minds of all of our leaders, rather than just occasionally be gloss or lipstick put on an economically focused world. So I recommend that, to Values. I'm a bit way through reading it, and so far I'm very encouraged.
Yes, I think it is most interesting you raised that, David, because again, it comes back to something that we've all been referring to on the side, really, is if the economic model currently, which drives certainly things in the Western world, it isn't changed, then we know we get increasing inequality and more social fragmentation. The problem is how to turn the oil tanker, isn't it? Because again, being very realistic, I mean, you were making the point, there are huge and powerful vested interests that want to maintain the status quo, so that those of us who have a humanistic approach to things are up against it. Really, I mean, at least we can agree on our common value system, and it's fascinating that Carney is also buying into this, and he's a strong voice, I think. But how that's put into practice, given the current system, let me give you an example. We would a couple of us were talking to people in New Zealand who are involved in the wellbeing economy set up there, where they've actually put into practice a system of economic indicators with a very charismatic female leader in a Labour Party that's actually in a very conservative country. But the problem is, so far, all right, it's early days, 2 or 3 years, but the truth is, even though they have all these measures, the evidence of impact at the moment is still very small. And there's a sense that these guys were talking to us about, that business people are carrying on as if nothing had happened, which wasn't quite the idea. But it's a huge challenge, isn't it? Any comments? I mean, there's no easy solution, is there?
No.
Building this solution is going to take at least as much effort as building the technology and building all the gadgets and building all the infrastructure that we've got already. And we just need to put more of our collective effort into building this set of values and all the support that goes with it. It is the key challenge of the next few years.
I agree entirely. Lars, can I bring you in now at this point? We're going to transition to our final session with Jim, but do you also want to contribute a bit to this conversation as we bring it to an end?
Well, definitely. I think I am doing that. I've been doing that for years or at least weeks, both here but also in general, talking about the economy of well-being, and also from the perspective of that it requires practical action. What is that practical action? Well, it's discussing things. It's taking initiatives at a local level. It's making sure that the shift, the mental, emotional intelligence, or the resilience that we talk about, that we practically build it by using it. It won't happen by a gift from above, whatever deity you might believe in or not. It will happen as a cause of practical action, probably by by yourself or your community or whatever. It's been a pleasure at least to listen to this distinguished panel. I think that it's definitely been a mind-blowing exercise. And I think especially the comment from David Wood, in this case, about that we should prepare ourselves that this, even when this is over, if you will, it is not the end, and it is not necessarily anything but the end of the beginning.
Lars, that's a nice way to finish. So thank you very much to all of our contributors today. And we're now going to have a chat with Jim, really about taking a look back at the last 5 sessions. But thank you, David. Thank you, Carsten. Thank you, the others too. And even those who just attended by video. But Jim, so how was it for you?
How was it for me? It was delightful. And I must say, David's last remarks there, I think, summarizes very succinctly the state that we're in. That, we're in a situation of escalating stress. The pandemic is just yet one more stress on a system that, because it's spinning out of control, is going to be escalating, whether through extreme weather events, political events, economic events, an assault on our sense of equilibrium and normalcy. And at the same time, as he said, solutions are also already increasing exponentially. And therefore, thirdly, and at the same time, our attitudinal, the infrastructure of our minds and our psyches are also going through a transformation. So the external world, good and bad, and our internal architecture are all morphing simultaneously. And that puts this issue of mental health and all of our, I would say, psycho-emotional hygiene, I think, front and center in a way that humanity's really never experienced for a very long time. So I felt this session was an extraordinary session. And the other thing I would say quickly, I was struck by the data coming out of Denmark. Here we have the happiest country in the world. And I just noted that, 40% of people that take early retirement are doing so for mental health reasons, which means that even in the happiest of countries, this issue is omnipresent and becoming more acute. So you can imagine what it's like in, many third world countries or countries like even the United States, which is very far down the happiness index and the mental health index, with you got the acute discontinuities that are occurring in the polity here. So really grateful to both of you for convening this and the other sessions.
Jim, though, we have got a little bit of time. I just wanted to come back to you. I mean, you made it very clear right at the beginning, even when you were going into the heart resonance thing, that your sense of the importance of inner hygiene, if you like. But what about that thing that Carsten raised, which inevitably is a certain thing about age, but I feel so strongly about the importance of what our grandchildren or the equivalent can bring to the future and how we can support them in that.
Well, yes, I think, we're in the pandemic is providing us an opportunity in a paradoxical way of bringing the generations together, because whether you're old in a nursing home or you're a young child and you want to go out to play, but you can't go out to school in person like kids have done for millennia, all of us are challenged, and therefore the transgenerational support that is needed is more acute and crucial now than perhaps it's ever been. And so again, paradoxically, it may be that the pandemic brings into focus something we talk about often in terms of transgenerational dialogue and so forth, but we never really get around to, but now has become a mental health imperative.
Well, as a Dane myself, I can share that a common joke in Denmark is that the key to happiness is having low expectations. But also, of course, the truth in that is, of course, that you have to have a realistic or realigned mental resilience for the everyday life, whatever the everyday life throws at you. Have to have the wherewithal to deal with those challenges, and the resilience that Carsten mentioned early on is, of course, or David for that matter, is building blocks that we need, because we will face challenges every day in our lives. We will face them in our adolescence, when we go through our work life, and when we go into retirement for that matter. It's a basic element. Happiness is not necessarily about only the positive sides, it's how we deal with the negatives as well.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny, you prompt me to say, sorry to interrupt you, but you prompt me to say something about that, which is, it's about loving life, isn't it? Even when you're being bruised by it. It's such an important issue, but that's part of resilience, isn't it? About feeling good enough in yourself that you want to go on, you don't feel like ending it all, because life matters. It's life energy and so on is something I'm sure Jim was buy into too.
Yeah.
Can I add on to this with a quote from Michael Rudder, who was very much into resilience? I once asked him, he was 82 by then, and I said, why are you still going on work? He said, well, that's obvious. It's hard but enjoyable. And that's actually a basic thing, I would say, to remember.
Yeah, beautifully put. Beautifully put.
I can at least say from David and I, we've been very, very happy in being here for the last these 5 sessions, and we're also very eager to be able to present another series of 5 starting in May. But for us so far, this has been a joyride, even though it's a bad situation we're in. We're trying to do the best of the negatives we've got.
I've enjoyed it very much too. So, Jim, thanks to you for making this possible and giving us the challenging task of bringing together all these folk. But it's been great fun, yeah. So, I think we'll hand it over to you, Jim.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, Lars, and thank you all on this panel. You're right. And this is one of the reasons why we do the very brief but focused heart coherence meditation every day as we start our session. We're in a world where the centrifugal force of change, both good and bad, the climate spinning out of control in different forms all over the world. We've noted just in the last few days the raging floods going on in Australia, for example, that have displaced thousands of people. We're in a world where globalization and technology are radically changing our lives. And we find ourselves in, this classic Prigogine situation where how do we create islands of coherence in a rising sea of chaos? Because that rising sea of chaos is our world. And how we create coherence, whether it's taking, a couple minutes, just centering yourself in your heart and experiencing a sense of gratitude. They say that's probably the healthiest thing one can do in the midst of chaos, is just simply practice heart coherence. And we just do it every day precisely for this reason that you all have been talking about, not only today, but in the past 5 sessions, of how do we design a public health system that is not reactive, but proactive, and feeds into the public domain the instrumentalities, the information sets, and the trainings that can enable the public in an increasingly chaotic world to maintain a sense of, I would just say, equilibrium. So that come what may, we have the personal resilience. And another thing that's been emphasized by these panels is the public, collective, communal nature of public health. It's not just an individual enterprise, it's a collective enterprise, because as social beings, we humans are as affected from the outside in by our peers as our peers are affected from the inside out as we interact with them and go about our life. So David and Lars and I have been in discussion, and in about a month's time, we're going to start another cycle of 5 sessions on public health. Because in my view, the issue of public health in all the levels of meaning of both public and health is perhaps the critical focal point for humanity at this time. Public health, which is normally seen as sort of there but uninteresting, and we just hope that they deal with it, particularly in a time of crisis. Now, I think, in my view, has emerged front and center as a crucial domain to ensure social cohesion and personal and communal empowerment, because all of us have to take in that this is only going to accelerate. And scientists are saying that it's not only going to accelerate, but this next decade, it could accelerate completely out of control. And if you just take that in for a moment, the solutions that we know are there have to be refined and put into the public domain, because we teeter on the brink of chaos. And as Jung said, the great psychiatrist Carl Jung said, what civilization is the thin veneer that we construct to keep at bay our atavistic impulses. And we're experiencing in the United States what happens when that thin veneer of politics and constitutional processes and economic and political stability starts to break apart. What comes up is all kinds of chaos. And so I just want to thank both of you in this panel today, because this is not just an academic issue. This, in my view, is an issue of inordinate national security importance. There's no domain now more important than public health for the 7-8 billion people now around this planet, almost all of whom have been affected by the pandemic, and their mental and emotional stability has been challenged. And we owe it to them to provide them the support they need as we move into an even more turbulent future. We're at an extraordinarily nuanced, fluid, delicate moment in the human journey. And Humanity Rising is dedicated, as you all know, to just profiling and promoting and making available the solutions that are available so that humanity can be empowered to do what we must do to ensure a more abundant and healthy and regenerative and naturally based world system. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you again here tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking with a very well-known best-selling author, Carolyn Myss, about her new book, which is about how you use the instrumentality of prayer to ensure emotional and psychological stability. So that'll be tomorrow here on Humanity Rising. Again, Lars, David, panel, thank you so much for this session today. It's been very inspiring. See you all tomorrow. Thanks so much. Great session, guys.